Yeah. Is Vaiga here in the class? Not yet. Okay. By the way, Vaiga was absent in the previous class also, huh? Okay.
Sir, which previous class?
Yes. In the previous science class we had, Vaiga was absent in that class
Saturday.
also, I think. The
No,
last
sir, no.
class we had, no,
Vega was not absent.
she was
She
present.
was present. Yes.
Okay. 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 So let's continue our
Uh,
discussion. Yeah.
sir, did you correct our papers?
Yo, peoples. Yeah. Actually, yesterday now I was out of the station. Okay. Actually, I had gone to a village for some urgent basis, so I
Okay.
didn't had the time. Okay. Today I after the class I will be sitting to check all the papers. Okay, there are several batches. I have to check paper of all the batches. So
Okay,
today it
sir.
will be checked. Okay now.
Okay.
So let's continue. Now we were talking about the different types of soils we have. Okay. Now before we even talk about we continue with the sandy soil, clay soil, and the loamy soil. We need to discuss about three important components like what is silt,
Sir,
what
I
is
forgot. I
Good
forgot.
evening,
Do
sir.
you?
yeah. Good evening, Maika. Yeah, Chakrika, what you were saying?
Yes, sir, I forgot. Can you explain soil erosion once again?
Okay, okay, sure. Soil erosion, basically what happens. Look, say there's a soil, okay, and if there's a flow of flood water, say there's a flood water, and the flood water usually moves with a strong force. Whatever comes in its path, it gets swayed away, right now. So it will also be carrying the soil, right now. It will be carrying the soil from this place and it will be depositing that soil to another place, right now. So the soil is being eroded from here and then getting deposited to any other place. So that is the concept of soil erosion. And it's not just the flood water that can lead to erosion of soil from one place to another. Apart from that, you have got winds also. If there are strong winds blowing, if there are strong winds blowing, so that can also lead to erosion of soil from that place. But usually, where do you see the soil erosion? In an open land, the soil that is unfertile, the soil on which no crop is growing right now, the land that is barren basically. Yes, yeah, you
Yes,
guys
sir.
are getting it now. Okay, so if there is absence of plants over the soil, then it's highly that it will lead to soil erosion. Because what happens, Vaiga, Sundush, and Chakrika, what happens? The roots of the plants, they are actually holding large chunks of soil particles. These roots are actually holding so much of soil. So if there were to be a flood in the forest, the soil will not be carried away by the flood water because those soil particles are being held by the roots of the plants very tightly. Getting it now? So deforestation has to be avoided. If I were to cut the forest, what will happen? Earlier, the soils were being held by the roots, but now they are not being held by anything. So they are basically free. So they will be easily carried away by the flood water or also by the strong winds also. So we need to basically do afforestation, that we need to plant more trees. Okay. Okay. Shall we move ahead then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we were talking about the soil types. Where the different types of soils? Okay. So you had the sandy soil, you have the clay soil, and the loamy soil. But now also, like, why there are different types of soils? Why not all the soils are of same types? Ever thought
So
about that?
not all the plants grow in same kind of soil.
No,
Or
that's
like
not a correct reasoning.
Due to the less
Like
and high humus.
the different types of soil because like they have different texture or like different nutrients, something like that.
Mhm. Because different types of soils will form from different types of rocks, and also they went through different types of weathering. Some of the soils went through physical weathering more, some of the soil went through chemical weathering more. Some of the soils might have been made from limestone rock, for example. Some of them might have been made from igneous rock, for example, or from metamorphic rocks. Getting it now? So the reason why we have got different types of soils, because the rocks from which they were made of, they were different. They were having different compositions. Suppose the clay soil, take the loamy soil, the rocks from which they were made up of, they might be different, right now? Getting it now? So
yes,
you
sir.
guys know that the weathering of rocks produces small particles of various materials. Whenever there will be weathering, we are talking about soil types. So when we talk about soil types now, you need to know the basics of weathering. So we know that weathering will do what? You have a piece of rock. Okay. So whenever there will be weathering of rock, it will lead to production of small particles of various materials, right? These are small particles, not these small particles are not alike to each other. All of them are different. So different small particles will be formed. And these small particles that will be formed, those will include what? Those will include sand. Okay, now those will include clay also, right? Those will include silt also. Those will include gravel also. I will be explaining about all of them. Don't worry, water, silt, water, gravel. These are new terms you might be hearing. Yeah. So, like, how much of sand will be formed? How much of clay will be formed from this rock? How much of silt? How much of gravel will be formed? Depends upon the rock from which these particles were formed. Like, how much of sand, clay, silt, or gravel will be formed? It will depend upon the type of rock also. Hmm? And we know that the rock particles which are present in the soil, there are rock particles also present in the soil now. Hmm? That could be varying in sizes. They are having different sizes. Their chemical composition is also different. Yeah, you guys are getting it on what I'm trying to say.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yeah, the basic idea here is that why you have got different soil types. The reason, if we were to talk about the reasons for it, reasons mainly include first reason, you guys know, soils, rocks went through different weathering. Okay, it is also due to different rock types. Okay, I can also say that we, as we know that weathering of rock not just happen in 100 years or 1,000 years. It took millions of years, right? So right now, the sand that we are seeing, after 1 million year, that sand can actually become soil. Sand is the sand particles can further be go through the process of weathering, and it might become soil now. Yes,
yes, sir.
right now. So the time scale also matters now. Time scale also matters. So can I say the fine soil particles that I see, those were formed from the oldest rocks, and the sand particles that we see today, those are formed from the relatively younger rocks that went through the process of weathering. Hope
Sir,
you
I'm not
guys
getting
are
the
able to
answer.
understand. Okay,
I'm not
suppose,
getting.
yeah, suppose this is rock 1 and suppose this is rock 2, and let's say now this is let's say 500 million years ago. Okay, and let's say this is let's say it is 200 million years ago. So I am saying that rock 1, when it went through the process of weathering for continuously how many years? For 500 million years. Okay, so suppose it went through the process of weathering continuously for 500 million years. So let's say that it will lead to formation of soil with very fine particles. Okay, now the particles of the soil, I'm saying that it will be very fine. It will be very good soil. And relatively, the rock 2 is here that were existing 2 million years ago, and it went through the weathering process for just 200 million years. So the soil with not so fine particles will be there. Hope you guys are able to relate what I'm trying to say. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Chakrika, Vaiga, Sundus,
Yes, sir.
getting it now. So that is the thing over here. The older the rock particles were there, so soil formed from them will be having more finer particles, right? Okay. Now further, I'm telling you that on the basis of the size, I told you moments ago, like the rock after the weathering, it will form small particles of sand, small particles of clay, or silt, or gravel. Okay. These are the small particles that will be formed from it, and all of them are different from each other, aren't they? Now,
Yes, sir.
also they have got different sizes now. A sand, a clay, or silt, or a gravel. All of them have got different sizes. So this classification that you see here, they are on the basis of size. They are on the basis of size actually. Shall I erase this one? Shall I erase this one?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, let me erase this one. So on the basis of size, the rock particles are classified as follows. As follows: sand, clay, silt, or gravel. So let's talk about these groups. These are the four main groups. First group here is sand. First group here is sand. Okay. Or अगर हम sequence, if you were to talk about any sequence, let's take the smallest. Let's take the clay first. What are clay particles? So clay are formed by what? These are formed by the smallest of the smallest rock particles. Those rocks which were very small in size. So it led to formation of clay. Okay. So the clay are what? They are so small that we cannot see a single clay particle. When you will hold clay in your hand, it will feel very smooth. Okay. Sundus, Vaiga, Chakrika. So those rocks that were very small, and when those rocks went through the process of weathering, it led to formation of clay. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. That's clear.
Okay.
Oh.
So these
Yes, sir.
were formed from weathering of very small rocks. Okay. If I were to talk about particle size, they are extremely small. Extremely small, can't be seen, and soft to touch. Soft to touch. Now, next talk about another rock particle. That one will be after clay. We'll be talking about silt here. Okay. Now, water silts. Sorry, I don't have the diagrams today in the class. Next class, I will be showing you the images of these particles. Now, silt is what? These were made up of somewhat bigger rocks. Suppose if I were to have a scale of the sizes of rocks. Okay. Say I have a scale of the sizes of the rocks. This is the biggest one. This is the slightly smaller, smaller, and then the smallest. The smallest rock particles that lead to formation of clay. Okay. And somewhat bigger will lead to formation of silt. So this rock here I'm talking about. Okay. So silt will be formed of somewhat bigger rock particles than the clay. Okay. So they were
So like I have heard like if the clay particles are very much like they are very big in size, it will be more rough. Like it could be rough for it.
more the size of the rock particle of rock from which it will form, more will be the size of the particles of the rock. So they were formed from somewhat bigger rocks than clay. The reason why I'm writing all these things so that you guys can either take a screenshot or either write them parallelly. Okay, right now. So they were formed from the particles, the rocks that were bigger than the clay. And in comparison to clay, it will be not as smooth as clay. So the second thing is not as smooth as clay. What else you will observe? That the cells are found where? So one of you asked me like, is sand and the sand found at the beach same? So I answered no, they are not actually same. Okay, I was not actually entirely sure, but now I'm sure that they are not same because because silts are found near the rivers, near the water bodies, near the oceans. Okay, now so the silts will be found where? It will be found near the water bodies. Where it is found? Found near water bodies. Okay, now near basically what I mean. I basically mean the coastal regions or basically the banks of the river. Okay, now is that clear? Apart from that, whenever there will be flood now, after the flood, you will see deposition of this silt. So floods actually deposits the silt from the river in the field. Floods will be whenever there will be flood now. So flood water will carry the silt that is deposited on the sideways of the river, and those silt will not be deposited to the field or to any other places. Getting it? And then after silt, we finally come to another rock particle that is basically sand. Okay. So to understand sand, you can actually imagine this rock. The sand might have been formed from this rock. So you can say that this is a scale representing the sizes of the rock, and the sand particles were formed from rocks that were bigger than those rocks from which silt and clay were formed. Right now. So these are the these were made up of larger particles enough enough than that of silt, and you can actually see the sand particles very clearly. You will be having difficulty in seeing the particles of the clay, or might be you might be having difficulty in seeing the particles of the silt also, but you can easily see the sand particles, isn't it? Okay, so rocks where the rocks from which it formed, so those rocks were bigger than that of silt and clay. What about particles, Vaiga? Can we see them? Particles can be seen very
Yes,
clearly.
sir.
Okay. And when you will hold them in your hand, it will be having a rough texture, right? And then finally we come to the last type of rock particles, that is gravel. Okay. So they are big enough. Okay now. So these were formed from the largest rock particles. So when this largest rock particle went through the process of weathering, it led to formation of gravel. Getting it now? This
Yes, sir.
scale is clear, no? Is anyone getting confused? What is this scale representing? This scale is
No, sir.
representing what then? It is representing the it is actually representing the rocks which went through the process of weathering, and due to the weathering, these particles were formed. So when the biggest rock went through the process of weathering, gravels were formed, then sand, then silt, and then clay as the size were decreasing. So gravel, it is formed from the largest rocks. So is it visible where I'm writing?
Yes, sir. It's visible.
From largest rocks. You can actually see them clearly. Okay. And in fact, when you will hold them in your hand, they are basically tiny stones. No? They are basically tiny stones. Okay. So you guys actually needed to know about the classification of small particles of rocks. You basically needed to be aware of these four groups: water, sand, clay, silt, and gravel. Is that clear to all of you? Only then we would be able to distinguish well between the sandy soil, between the clay soil, and the loamy soil. Okay. So let's talk about the sandy soil. In fact, we have already,
Sir, can you go to the previous slide once?
yeah, I was saying that it was important for you
No, sir.
guys to
Can you go
know.
to the slide, like the previous slide?
Oh, okay, okay. Hmm. Shall I read the line? What have we written?
I got
No,
what
sir.
you
You
meant
can
by
go to the next slide.
Okay. Yeah, Sundus, you were saying
sir,
something?
is gravel like that stones that are like found in oceans, inside the oceans, like I know that stones.
You can
Like in
actually see they are
aquarium or
oval
something,
shape.
you mean?
They will be like
Yeah,
oval
in the
shape.
aquarium.
In the aquarium, exactly. Okay. Like the rocks you find in the aquarium, right now. Exactly. Those are tiny pebbles which you see. Those are basically gravels actually. Okay now. Now, sandy soil we have already discussed that. Do you guys have any confusion in that? Sandy soil
No.
we have already discussed,
No,
right?
sir.
So sandy soil will be any soil that will contain silt, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Sandy soil will consist of silt in it. Yeah. Vaiga, Sundus, Chakrika. Sandy soil will be any soil that will consist of silt or sand in it. Sand, no.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So those contains mainly sand, and sand are quite large particles. And I think there will be no spaces between the sand particles. Huh? What do you think?
Sir, there are
So there
very big
is no
spaces in
space
between.
because it's filled with air.
There will be space now. There will be
Yeah,
large
because then how
spaces.
the water will get loose if like
Yeah, okay, sir.
in it.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. I will be misquoting the statement. You have to correct that. Okay. Just to check your attentiveness in the class. Okay. So water will be easily passing through the particles of the sand. Okay. So thereby it will be having a high water retaining capacity. Isn't it? Sand will have a high water retaining capacity or not? If it allows the water to percolate through it. So it should be having a high water retaining capacity, or should it not be having a high water retaining capacity? Hello. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. If it is having, it is if it allows the water to percolate through it easily. So I think it should be having a high water retaining capacity. Huh? What do you guys think? Hello,
Yes, sir.
Chakrika. Yes. Why you guys are saying yes? Hmm?
No, sir,
Have
like,
you?
can you repeat the question?
My
Yes, sir. Could you
question.
repeat the question?
Yeah, my question is that if sandy soil is easily allowing the water to percolate through it, so I say that it must be having a high water retaining capacity. Yeah, am I right or wrong? Yeah, Sundus, Chakrika, and Vaiga. Am I quoting the statement correct? Let me repeat the question. I am saying that sandy soil has high water percolation rate. So will it be retaining water or losing the water?
Losing the water.
Losing the
Losing the
water.
water.
Sir, sir, retaining the water basically means absorbing, right?
To holding it basically,
Yeah,
absorbing it
basically
and
absorbing, right?
holding it.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
I mean, sir, it
So,
cannot
sir,
hold it, right?
but
It is
like,
having like very large like space between it. Cannot
Sundus,
hold it for very long time.
Sundus dad is correct. Yeah, Chakrika.
sir, I don't get it. Because, like, when we actually mix water with the sandy soil, it stays. Like, we can still feel the wetness and we can still see the water that, like, because of the texture and stuff. So,
Mhm. Okay, you are not quoting it wrong 100%, but the thing is that what happens? Suppose, okay, just give me a moment. Please keep it on charge. Yeah. So I was saying that suppose if you were to add 100 ml of water in a sample of sand, you have taken a beaker. Say you have taken a beaker like this. Okay, now, and if you were to pour 100 ml of water in it, what will happen now? 4 to 5 or 6 ml of water will be absorbed by the top layers of the sand in it, and the rest will be deposited at the bottom of this beaker, let's say.
okay, sir.
Okay, so here the number that is being the amount of water that is being held by the particles of the sand, it is very small as compared to the majority of the water that is being settled down at the bottom of it. Getting it now? Or had it been hollow from the bottom, had I placed a filter paper here, what will happen? Water will start dripping from here. Getting it now?
So, but that's if the beaker has a
Yes,
hole,
yes.
but
I just gave you a
like,
situation,
there's
for
a like
example. Mm,
filtration. Yeah, yes, sir, I get it.
right? But if I were to have a clay soil in it, if I were to have a loamy soil in it, and even if I were to place a filter paper, you guys know what is filter paper. You must have used that. So
Yes,
filter paper in the laboratories, you might have used that. So if I were to place a filter paper and have some clay soil and loamy soil in it, so then also some water will drip, but then it will be very less. Okay. So that will actually prove Kia sandy soil has got very less water retaining capacity, while the other types of soils have in a ascending manner they will having more water retaining capacity. So what should I do? Should I suppose I want to do the paddy cropping? Should I do it in the sandy soil? If I were to grow rice
Sir?
plants, if I were to grow rice plants,
yes,
if
sir.
I were to grow rice plants, shall I grow in the sandy soil? And if not,
No, sir.
or if yes, then why? Yeah.
I think sir,
Sir, no.
Hmm.
yeah.
The answer
Sir,
is
not
correct.
sorry.
Sir, because as you said before, the sandy soil holds, I mean, it does not hold the water, So the plant does not get enough water to grow properly. So we don't get the crop.
Exactly. That is the reason. So Chakrika, you have quoted the reason very correct. Because for paddy crop, especially that is rice, you need to basically flood the field. Okay, you have to provide sufficient amount of water in it, right? Okay, correct then. Oh, okay. Please hand over the pen. Please hand over the pen. Yeah. So as
Sir, I will come back in 2 minutes.
yeah, sure. Please repeat.
Sir, I'll just come back in 2 minutes.
Okay, no, sure.
So can I just go drink water and come?
Yeah, sure. Meanwhile, Sundus, if you have any questions, please do ask.
No, sir, I don't have any questions.
Okay. So, what about your maths classes? Or which chapter is going on in maths?
The simple equations.
Okay, simple equations. Okay. So, when are you planning to take admission? In the next year or in class 9?
I don't know, sir, like next year, maybe or this December. Because I don't know, it depends on my brother and sister exams. So I don't know.
Okay.
Like they are doing that right.
Okay. So, also, are you preparing for some competitive exams also, like for entrance exams of some schools? Acha.
So I
Okay.
didn't get the question. Ask again.
Yeah. Many times students do prepare for Olympiad exams also. Some students prepare for entrance exams of some schools to get admission there. Yeah. So many students prepare for that, or many students prepare to move abroad to study in different schools, and to prepare for scholarship exams. I thought any one of you who is preparing for any sort of exams like that.
Not right now, sir. I don't know which school I'm gonna go in, so I don't know.
Okay. Let's continue. Yeah, why are you back in the class?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so sandy soil we already discussed. In today's right now we'll be talking about the clay soil.
So we finished clay soil, right?
Clay soil. Yeah,
Yeah, so we finished it, right?
we finished it.
Okay.
Okay, we finished it, but let's just revise it for for one or two parts.
But
Okay.
we will have to discuss it again, sir. Like
Mhm.
in the last class, you mistaken it by Lumi soil, and then you said you will explain again.
Instead of that, we discussed that. We discussed loamy soil. Yeah.
But I still don't know what that is, sir.
You mentioned its characteristics. So clay soil particles, they are actually smaller than the particles of the sand, the sandy soil. Their particles will be smaller than the sandy soil, and they are somewhat packed more tightly. Okay, so it leaves little space for air, right? So first of all, they are more, or rather than we see that the particles are more smaller than the sandy soil. The reason being obvious, because they were formed from smaller rocks as compared to the sand. Remember this scale over here, right?
Yes.
The the clay soil were formed from the rock particles that were smaller than that of the sandy soil. So the particles are more smaller than the sandy soil. So
Sir,
like
like
if
it's
I
hard to like it will cannot like absorb water that easily, but then when it will will it like absorb? It will not like let it lose the water.
It will have a good retaining capacity of water. Okay. Also, you guys understand the simple thing now. Understand the geometry here. If I were to have particles of sand like this, particles of sand like this, okay, so they are having an arrangement like this, thereby you can see that there are some empty spaces between them also. If I were to have particles of clay soil, so the particles will be having a size like this, for example. So thereby, the reason why you will be seeing that there are less spaces between the two particles because of their geometry. The contact area size here will increase basically because of the shape and size of the particles. Suppose now, suppose you are having two bigger pieces of rocks. Just imagine like you're having two big pieces of rocks, and if you were to put them close to each other, so the contact area is only this much. This much is the contact area between the two. Yeah. Or take some other rocks also. Take some other particles also, like this, like this,
Okay.
like this, like this. Okay. A lesser amount of the surface area of the particles here are in contact to each other. Okay, let's suppose now this is a magnified view of this sand particles. Let's say these are sand particles. This is a magnified view. If I were to take the particles of the clay soil, for example, here and magnify it further, so I will be seeing that, say this is like this, like this, like this. Okay, so do you see, is it leaving the room for air? Do the
No,
particles leave the
sir.
room for air? Almost not at all,
No, sir.
because
Yes.
because the arrangement here is different as compared to that of the sandy soil. Getting it now. So the
It
sandy,
is basically tightly packed, right?
they are tightly packed. Okay now. So they are tightly packed, thereby leaving less room for air particles, air basically. So
Yes, sir.
tightly packed clay soil particles leaves very less space for air, right? Okay. So if it is having lesser space for air, so suppose if you were to pour some water over it, so water, when you will pour over it now, so you are pouring some water over it, so thereby water will be for a greater amount of time, water will be locked in those spaces. Water will be locked in those spaces. Getting it now? Water will be locked here, here, or here, or here, right? And the percolation rate will be also very smaller, because since there are lesser space in between the particles, so the rate of percolation will be also smaller, no? Lesser.
So, sir, would the water, so like basically the water will get mixed in the clay soil, right?
It gets mixed with the particles of the clay soil. It gets mixed
Okay.
right now. Right. Okay. Further, what do we observe here? Like, talking about its fertility. First thing here we have talked about the size. Second thing, we know that it is having a good water retaining capacity, right? And look, basically, whatever minerals or whatever fertilizers or manures, if you were to provide it to a land that is dry, the soil will not absorb it. If I were to put
Yes,
on
sir.
fertilizers, I'm talking about the fertilizers in the powder form, not the spray. Okay, now, not the liquid fertilizers. So I have fertilizers, I have manures also. If I were to spray them or put them on a dry land, on the dry soil, so it will not absorb. So basically, the fertility will be less for the dry soil. But clay soil, since it can retain water now, so its absorption for the fertilizers and manures will also be good now. Yes, isn't it? So that is a simple thing. So
Also, can you explain again, like from the part of fertilizers?
yeah, sure. Look, suppose if there were to be no saliva in our mouth, will you be able to taste the food if there is no saliva?
No, sir.
No. What basically happens? The food, the chemical, basically the components of the food mixes with the saliva, and then the taste buds present in our tongues taste them. The receptors sends the message to the brain, and then we interpret the taste. So that is a different thing. But here you can relate in the manner that if there were to be no water present in the soil, so to with so how will the fertilizer in the powder form mix? To what it will mix? It needs to be mixed with the water so that the soil can absorb it.
So,
So
sir,
basic.
like if it's
Hmm,
kind of solid kind of mixture of fertilizer,
hmm.
then it won't be able to take it.
Exactly,
But
exactly.
if it's a fertilizer mixed with liquids, then it'll be able to take it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So you can also say like if you were to go to the desert region and if you were to spray hundreds of kilos of fertilizer on the sand, it is of no use because the sand particles will not be absorbing it now. Right, Sundus, Maika, Chukrika, right?
Yes, sir.
So its absorption is good, hence its fertility is good. Also, since it will have some amount of air spaces between the particles, right? And it will also be having water in it. It will consist of humus also. It will lead to growth of humus also, but the humus will be very little. Okay, now getting it now. So it contains little humus. Little humus is present in it. Now, if I were to compare the mass of clay soil and the mass of sandy soil, if I were to give 100 gram of sandy soil and 100 gram of, uh, 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 let's say you were to take 100 gram of clay soil and 100 gram of sandy soil. Okay, now I'm talking about only the particles, not about the water, not about any other thing. Just I'm considering that you have got particles of sandy soil and clay soil. So then which one will be heavier?
Sandy.
Why sandy will be heavier?
Sir, can you say the question again?
Just say that you have got in one fist, in your one hand you are having sandy soil, in another hand you will be having clay soil. Okay, forget about the mass, forget about how much you are holding. Just say that you are holding equal amount of, just say that you are holding one, you are having like just equal amount of sandy soil and clay soil in your hand. The clay soil will be feeling more heavier. Why? Because it consists of water in it. It consists of heavy amounts of moisture in it. Well, the sandy soil is basically dry.
Okay, sir.
Thereby, it will feel light in weight. Getting it now. So another
Yes.
thing is that it is heavier than sandy soil. Okay. Also, it is more fertile than the sandy soil. Right. Now, how can I actually improve the fertility of this clay soil? If I were to increase the fertility of the soil, then I will be adding some humus in it and I will be adding some sand in it also. Can you guys explain to me, like, why, in order to increase the fertility of the sand, of the clay soil, I will be adding sand in it? I said that in order to increase the fertility of the clay soil, I will be adding some amount of sand in it, and I will be adding humus in it. I think the humus part is clear. Why will be adding humus in it? Because humus
Yes.
increases the fertility. But what about sand? Why should I add sand particles in it? Yeah, all of you answer that to me. Yeah, or at least just try to think of some of the points. Okay.
Sir, so it's like the question is like, do we need to add sand, or like why is the sand added?
Why the sand is added? added.
Okay, so
I think so because the sand particles that like they are less in it, so we need to add more.
That is not the reason now. Why go?
So I'm not getting an answer.
sir, I don't get it. Like in clay soil, the water part is like, is it mixed like forever? Will the water be in the clay soil forever? Like not forever, like every single time, maybe
Okay.
That big
24/7,
particle.
maybe.
Okay. I will come to your answer. Sundas, you are saying
To
something.
add big particles.
Particles will.
Like to add big particles, I said.
Okay. It is to add bigger particles. But what will adding bigger particles do? And coming to your question, Chakrika, that will the clay soil always hold water? Look, have you visited farmland? Have you visited the cropland?
Yes,
If
sir. Yes, sir,
yeah,
I did.
so there you see that there you will see that for most part of the year, if you were to hold some chunk of sand of soil in your hand, you will find moisture in them. Okay. As a matter of fact, today I also
Mm,
happened to visit a village, and there was I was actually on the farmland. Okay, so there I
yes,
observed
sir.
that the soil was holding a good amount of moisture in it, although it was
Yes,
a
sir,
bright
because,
sunny day.
yes, sir, because like they water the field many
Hmm.
times. Okay, okay, yes,
they
sir.
they water the field also. Okay, but then also they have got a good retaining capacity of water. So the upper surface of the water, or upper surface of the sand, that might appear as dry in nature. Why upper surface of the soil that will appear as dry, but once you dig the soil, once you plough the land, you will get that there's a moisture. How do you know that? From touching that portion of the soil, and from also their color. The soil
Yes,
that will
sir.
be having moisture, that will be having a darker color, right? So it
Yes,
doesn't
sir.
mean that they will be having water always. I mean to say, okay, it's not like the water will basically percolate slowly to the ground. No, it holds a good amount of moisture for a longer period of time. Okay, but then that depends upon the type of soil also. Now back to the question which I asked you guys. Say I have the
So
clay
is it
soil in it.
because like
Hmm.
sandy soil is less tightly packed?
Sandy soil is lightly packed.
Less
Yeah.
tightly packed.
Look, your answer lies in this. Okay, now look. Basically, what happens? These are the particles of clay soil, and clay soil is having very less space between them. Okay, so less space leads to what? If it is having less space, so there will be less air in it, right? Less air will be
Yes,
there.
sir.
Okay, or also it will lead to growth of lesser humus in it. Less humus is found in it. So if I were to just increase the space a tiny bit, just increase the space by a little bit. So what I will do now, I will be I will be putting some bigger pieces of particles in it. So for that purpose, I will be putting sand in it. I will be putting sand in it. So addition of sand particles will create some spaces between the soil particles here, thereby allowing the air to be held between the soil particles, and some more water can be retained by the soil. Not retained, it can be present in
Yes,
between
sir.
the particles of the soil, and also it will further help in the growth of humus also. Getting it?
Sir, can you explain again? I don't get it.
Yeah, sure. Look, as we know that the particles of the clay soil are closely packed like this now, like this they are closely packed.
Yes, sir.
So there is very less air space between the particles. So
Sir.
what I did now, I have inserted, let's say I have inserted sand particle. Let's just take one sand particle in order to understand it. So when I will put this sand particle between the soil particles, what will happen? Now the arrangement will somewhat look like this.
Yes, sir. Like the clay soil particles will part away.
Exactly. The clay soil particles will now start to part away. Getting it now? Let's add some more sand particles.
Okay, sir.
Getting it now? So thereby the arrangement of the soil particle now changes a little bit. So thereby it allows for more air to seep in between the particles of the soil and water also, and then humus will also further grow. Right?
Okay, sir. I got it.
Good. To increase the fertility, we add some amount of sand in it. Okay. So far, any confusion in sandy soil, please do ask here.
No, sir.
Right now?
No, sir.
Okay. And one of the interesting property of clay soil is now the potter's clay. You all have heard now this. What is the potter's clay?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hmm? The potter's clay. What clay it is being referred to? It is simply this clay soil, right? And the reason why this potter will be using clay soil instead of a sandy soil. What property? Because of what property they will be using this? Can you think of that property? Have
I
you ever
think
seen?
because of the
Hmm.
rolls, right?
Because
So
it's
we can
sticky.
make it in any shape.
Any shape is also good. Sticky is the main reason.
Sticky.
Being sticky is the main reason, right now. So clay soil is very sticky, so that it can be used to make pots, it can be used to make bricks also, toys, statues, etc. Right now. Okay. So
Yes,
in
sir.
the festival season also, the statues that are made, the idols that are made, okay, they are also made using the clay soil because it is sticky. So another important property is that
But like most of them are like made of with like plaster of Paris.
yeah, in different parts it varies. Okay, now like
Yes,
here
sir.
in India, I basically see that the northern part of India, especially that they will be using first like a straw. Okay, straws will be used, and then normal soil will be used, and then when they plaster it now they will be using a clay soil. But now people are switching to the plaster of Paris also because it is a better alternative right now.
Yes, sir.
You can actually give more shape and give it a more smooth look, right? So clay soil is sticky. Okay, by the way, since you have mentioned plaster of Paris, also called as POP, okay, what are the uses of the plaster of Paris, by the way, guys?
Sir, until I know, I only know the disadvantage. I mean, like it harms the nature. But, like I'm not sure about the advantages.
Plaster of Paris, what is it? Plaster of Paris. Plaster, you guys know, whenever someone's bone is fractured, they put a
Yes,
plaster
sir.
over it. So it's the same plaster, POP, plaster of Paris, that is applied over the broken bones in order to fix that.
So they also apply like a cloth on it
Yep.
to plaster it, right?
Obviously, first of all, they will apply a cloth over the cloth. They will place this, and then they will place bandages over it, another layer of plaster of Paris. Right now, so it's not like you just simply place it over the skin. No, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Also earlier, plaster of Paris, because plaster of Paris also it is sticky and it actually solidifies. Okay, now, so once you have um, the plaster of Paris, you actually need to give it a shape immediately. Okay, because if you were to leave it, it will harden. Okay, so that is plaster of Paris. And those were its uses, that it can be used for plastering, getting it up. Also,
Okay, sir.
um, also dentists use plaster of Paris to create dental models. Okay, now the dentists are also using it in order to create the dental models. Getting it now? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So,
Like the artificial tooths.
not the artificial tools. Suppose I have to create a 3D model of something. Okay, now. Suppose I have to create a 3D model of anything. For example, anything, any statue. Okay. So I need a substance that can be molded into shape very easily, right now, and then it should solidify also after some time. So I will be using a plaster of Paris, because you can mold it, you can
Yes,
give it
sir.
any
It's
shape.
basically like that, right? Basically, like making tooths, but like not really tooths.
Not really, right now.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Basically, you can, apart from that, you can use it to make any 3D models also, to construct 3D models. Okay, na Sundus, Vaika, Chikrika.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.